Thanks for checking out Scotty's Hobbies. Today we're looking at this 2007 Yukon. We're going to be replacing the rear brake pads and rotors. This will be the same, if not very similar, for many makes and models such as the Cadillac Escalade, the Chevy Avalanche, Chevy Silverado, Chevy Suburban, Chevy Tahoe, GMC Sierra, GMC Yukon, and the Yukon XL, as long as you have rear disc brakes. The Silverado, you might run into a rear drum, but I'm not sure. But if you have rear disc, this video will help you out. This is probably going to be part one of part two. And in my videos, I always give you the tools, or let you know the tools that you need, give you the proper torque specifications, give you tips if there is any as we're going. So make sure you look for links in the description below to purchase the parts and tools that I'm going to be using in this video. And if you're wondering how I get the proper torque specifications for tightening everything up, that will be in part two. Let me show you. This is the motor guide book for brake specifications that I use a lot. I got a few of these books. You can see this is 1996 to 2021. But I have a few of these books that I cover everything. I believe I have from like 1983 to 2023 as it is right now. Those are really helpful books. You'll find those in the description below as well. Like, subscribe, and share while you're watching. Let everybody know what kind of vehicle that this video helped you on. And let's get going on the disassembly process on this 07 Yukon rear brakes. Here we are in the garage. Now, you can see the vehicle is already jacked up. We have a jack stand under the vehicle. Make sure that it's supported properly. First, after we get the wheel off, set that off to the side. Make sure you're not setting it onto the paint of the vehicles so you don't hurt the paint job or anything like that, scratch it or anything. So set that wheel off to the side. Now we're going to take a look at everything. Just make sure everything is going to go according to plan. Make sure the boots aren't ripped. If you need to go get some of those accordion boots where the sliders slide in and out, make sure there's nothing, no grease around those or any moisture or anything like that that would indicate those need to be replaced. Hopefully you have the brake pads, rotors, and hardware kit just setting off to the side, and all you really need to do is gather your tools. Let's take a look at the caliper, the bracket, see what tools we're actually going to need. To remove the bracket from the actual axle, you're going to need an 18mm socket. And to remove the caliper from the bracket, you're going to need a 13mm socket. To do this job, I am going to use most of the tools that you should have, or a basic mechanic set that you should have at home. If you need any of the tools or parts shown in this video, make sure you look for links in the description below to purchase those parts and tools. We'll be using a basic mechanic set, torque wrench, caliper compressor, and I believe a crescent wrench. Not much more, but I will point everything out as we go through it in this video. Now that we know what we need, we could go ahead and start taking everything apart. Now, one of the hardest parts about me doing these videos is finding you a good angle that actually makes sense or makes it so you could see everything I'm doing. So that's really the hardest part for me. Now that we know that we have all the right tools and everything, first we're going to remove the 13mm bolts from the caliper slider. You might have a problem like I have in this video where the slider pins are actually spinning. I'm using a crescent wrench to hold the sliders in place so I could actually remove that 13mm bolt from them. Remove both of the bolts from the top and the bottom of the caliper. When you remove the caliper, make sure it doesn't just hang there. You want to support it properly. This brake job took me about an hour and a half to 2 hours to do the rear on both sides. That's getting everything really cleaned and everything. Make sure everything is properly lubed up. So to do a proper BJ, it's going to take you a few minutes to get it done, but it doesn't take you that long, and you're going to save a ton of money doing this process at home. Now that you have that caliper right there on the frame or somewhere on the suspension, somewhere it's not going to hang there, we could go ahead and remove the bracket from the spindle or the bracket from the axle. One thing I like to do while I'm doing brake jobs is take lots of pictures. Actually, any job, take lots of pictures, especially during the disassembly. So when I am reassembling everything, if I'm not making a video like I am for you guys, I could always go back and look at the pictures and make sure that the brake pads are in the proper position, the wear indicator is where it was at when I took it off, and just all that good stuff. So take lots of pictures while you're doing your job. And also, if you post anything, make sure you @ me and tag me. Let me know if this video does help you out. Let me know the year, make, model of vehicle, all that good stuff. And it's really nice to know that these videos are helping you out. To remove the bracket from the axle, I'm going to use a 3/8 socket on a 1/2-inch breaker bar because I couldn't find my 3/8 breaker bar. That probably would have sufficed in this situation. but 3/8 socket, 18 millimeter on a 1/2 inch breaker bar. Loosen up the bolts going through the bracket into the axle. I used a dead blow hammer to give me a little bit of impact to loosen these up. When tightening everything up, the proper brake specifications is pretty tight on these, so it's kind of hard. And given the area where they're at, they're pretty hard to actually loosen up. But it is very doable, as you can see in this video, using mostly hand tools. I do use a little bit of air tools coming up in the video, but that's just to clean everything up. So using all basic hand tools is what we're going to use to get this job done, like I said earlier in the video. And again, if you need any of these tools, look for links in the description below to purchase those. After loosening up the bolts with the breaker bar, I switched over to my 1/2 inch socket wrench to remove the bolts completely. I don't really need to use that breaker bar the whole time to remove the bolts. The socket wrench is just fine after you loosen everything up. I really wouldn't recommend hitting your socket wrench too much with a hammer, especially when you're trying to loosen the bolts. You might ruin the teeth inside that socket wrench. To get this job done, it was about $300 for all 4 brake pads and rotors, so the front and the rear. I found this set online. I used Power Stop brake pads and rotors and hardware kit. Everything came as one complete kit, which I really like about the Power Stop brakes. But when you go purchase your brake pads and rotors, just make sure you get a hardware kit. You get top of the line stuff if you're going to be doing it at home. Don't try to cut any corners on price when it comes to that area. Always make sure you're using good products when you're doing a brake job. Now that we have the bracket bolts loosened up, we're going to remove those, set them off to the side. We're not going to lose them. I'm not going to do anything to destroy them. I don't know how you would in this situation, but you never know. You might put them under the jack or something and forget about them and strip them out. Don't want to do that. You don't want to make your job any harder than this is going to be. Now that the bolts are out of the bracket, remove the bracket with the pads inside the bracket. You could remove the pads if you want prior to this, but as we go in this video, you can see I'm just leaving everything loaded in the bracket and just setting everything off to side as one. We are going to clean these brackets up. We're going to put new hardware kit, new brake pads, clean the sliders up, everything coming up very shortly. This brake job was done at about 150,000 miles on the rear. This is the first time this rear brake job has been done. It's about 150,000 miles. On the front, we were doing the second brake job. So 150,000 miles, second on the front, 150,000 miles on the first for the rear. So that's really not bad. To get the rotor off, you could either whack it with a hammer a couple times. I'm using the dead blow. That didn't get it off. So what I ended up doing is using the bolts for the slider pins, or going through the caliper into the slider pins. Those fit perfectly into the rotor. So I tightened those up onto the rotor, and that actually pushes the rotor off of the hub, which made it really, really easy. But be careful. If your rotor is stuck to the hub really, really tight, you don't want to strip these bolts out and cause yourself more problems, like I said earlier. Just tighten them up. If they go in pretty easy, you could see that rotor moving, go ahead and use them. But if it's anything that you're going to use any oomph to remove this rotor, I would suggest finding some more bolts that fit the rotor and can push on the hub assembly. If you're having problems removing the rotor, another thing to double check is to just make sure your parking brake or your emergency brake is not on. You got to make sure that the parking brake or emergency brake is disengaged to get these rotors off. With everything disassembled, I'm going to start unloading the pads from the bracket, clean the bracket off, clean the slider pins off, and I'm going to cover all that in part 2. So in part 2, starting off, we'll be cleaning everything up, lubing everything up, and installing it all. So make sure you go check out the video library, find that second video, and also before you go, like, subscribe, and share. If you know somebody with a 2000s GMC, Chevy, Cadillac truck, or SUV, make sure you share my channel with them. I have a ton of videos covering this truck, and hopefully I will see you on another video. Thanks for checking out Scotty's Hobbies. I'll see you on the next hopefully helpful video.